What's going on, internet? IG back again today. And I know I don't often review phones on this. Wait a minute. I think the mic is going to be too far away. Ooh. I don't often review phones on this channel. But here's the thing. I've been doing some thinking lately, and it's really been bothering me how expensive phones are getting. Because what most people don't realize is that you don't need to spend nearly as much money as people do to get a decent phone. So here's the story of my day with a mid-ranger. Okay, quick disclaimer time. The following review is of the Xiaomi Mi A2 Lite, which was sent to me by Banggood, so shout out to them. But what I want to say is that this review was not paid or sponsored by Banggood in any way. Having said that, the link in the description is an affiliate link, which means that if you go ahead and buy one of these or something else from Banggood's site, I will get a small amount of that purchase. So, having said all that, what follows is my opinion, and it's unbiased as possible, so I hope you enjoy. Now, when I'm talking about a mid-range device, for me personally, that means I'm spending about $300 to $500 Australian dollars. The thing is, there's a bunch of different smartphone markets out there now. There's the top end, which is like stupid expensive. Then there's like your second-rate flagships. We all know what those are: the iPhone XR, the Galaxy S10e, that kind of thing. Then you've got your premium mid-ranges, then you've got your mid-ranges, then you've got your budget, and then you got your super budget. Now, here's the thing. There is plenty of devices out there which could take the name of flagship killer. OnePlus has been doing this for ages. Pocophone jumped into the market last year. But I want to focus on a device that is very clearly in the mid-range, if not possibly even budget, and look at what exactly are we trading off on here. Now, context-wise, my use case is going to, of course, vary to yours. And in terms of who I am and what I like using, I'm a real open source guy. I love Linux. I love using, I love the fact that I can connect basically any Android phone to Linux using KDE Connect or GS Connect, the extension that's built off that. That's a different story. I'll touch on that. But today, the phone that I'm going to be using for this experiment is the Xiaomi Mi A2 Lite. This is, to me, indicative of the kind of value that's out there. And I want to be really clear about two things. This isn't your ordinary review. I'm not going to prattle on about specs and that kind of thing. And secondly, this is about looking at what you get for the money and what you don't get. And pay close attention to those things, because hopefully this will help you guys crystallize what you need and what you don't need in a smartphone in 2019. So, my day with a mid-ranger. These are some of the things that I noticed first of all. Compared to cheaper devices, this one especially, its haptic engine is on point. Like, I'm gonna get the sound of what it sounds like to type on this thing in just a moment, but the sound or the feeling that you get when you're typing on this thing is really tight, which is something that you usually get in those more expensive devices. Other cheaper devices, like this one, the vibration motor is mushy as. So that's one point. Also, the other thing that I noticed, compared to other devices, the screen on this gets plenty bright. So like brightness, outdoor reading is not a problem. It's a standard LCD display. It's not a super AMOLED or anything expensive, but it gets bright enough outdoors that you shouldn't have any worries whatsoever. The other thing is that, kind of like a lot of flagships, this is missing a headphone jack, and that did hurt me when I was using this in the review period. But also what I will say is that this particular one, the Mi A2 Lite, this happens to get much better performance because of the Snapdragon 660 in it compared to a lot of other phones at the same price point. So hang on, let's come back to that vibration motor here for a second. I'm just going to start typing and see if you guys can hear this. Hear how crisp that is? Anyway, so now the other thing is that in terms of software, like I've got to talk about software. I'm a big enthusiast for Android based on Linux. It has open potential to do whatever you want with the device. Xiaomi are actually pretty decent in terms of supporting the modding world out there. So the nerdier folk among you who want to just grab this and install Lineage OS on this, you can do that. Now, before you consider doing that, I would actually recommend giving the actual stock standard MIUI a go. Here's a couple of reasons why. First of all, the one-handed use of this in terms of like your gestures, where you long swipe up to get to your multitasking, you quickly swipe up to go home. These are all futuristic gestures that Android Pie, its default, doesn't. I don't think Android Pie does one-handed swipe gesture navigation very well at this point. I would argue that this one actually does it better. You swipe in from either side of the screen to go back. You swipe up from the bottom to go home, and you long swipe up to multitask. Yes, it sounds familiar, but to me, it's better than stock Android. Now, back to specs just for a quick minute. This particular model comes with 4 GB of RAM, 64 GB of storage. For me, that's plenty. I have never found a time where this phone was laggy or struggling to change between apps. What I will say is that if you're really big into filming, then using this camera at its maxed out potential does become a bit of a RAM hog for whatever reason, just because it's processing a fair bit. Also, it is worth mentioning that gaming performance on this particular device at its price point is actually better than a lot of the other phones on the market, including those by Nokia, including those by Motorola. I'm thinking of the Nokia 6.1, I'm thinking of the Motorola One, and a lot of the phones that are being launched in developing markets usually will have the Snapdragon 636, which has a much inferior GPU in it, whereas this one, the 660, has got the Adreno 512, gives you much better graphics potential for games and that kind of thing. Now, here's something that I missed. I honestly missed having NFC on this thing. The design of this device is very, very nice, and its glass back, while slippery as heck, is quite nice to look at. They include a case in the box, so you don't get it scratched up too quick, but I was thinking that NFC was going to be standard. True story, I walk up to a cafe, I order my coffee, I know I've forgotten my wallet, I left it at home, and I'd set up Google Pay on this device using the Google Pay app. Went to hit the reader, nothing happened. And the Google Pay app comes up telling me that I can't use contactless payments on this thing because it doesn't have NFC. I guess it's just one of those corners that you cut to try and keep the price down, but it hurt. One other weird thing is that the height of the display with these, notched displays where they have the big thing at the top, that's actually, it actually makes it kind of hard to reach the top of the screen to pull down the notification tray with one hand. Just an observation. And I've got pretty big hands too, so it's a 6.26 inch display, and while it's only 1080p resolution, sharpness wise it looks perfectly decent next to the next big phone that you might have carrying around. And on that note, the build quality of this is solid, like really good. Like you pick this up and it feels just as expensive as a Galaxy or something like that. The tactile buttons, very, very clicky. Like I said, the haptic engine on point, and in the brighter colors, like the sunset orange and the changing color blue to purple, this is a really eye-catching device. In black, it's a little bit more pro and a little bit more boring, but it still has a funky reflective glass plate on it, which it kind of refracts the light in a weird way. You can also see it's an absolute fingerprint magnet. So there's that to consider as well. Now, I've got some closing thoughts about MIUI. Now, this is the part where, again, most of you guys, my audience watching this video, will probably be thinking, okay, hardware's all right. Talk to me about the cameras. I'll get to that. But the software interface itself, MIUI, is, I would say, less inspired by iOS than other Chinese manufacturers. Xiaomi is kind of got a bit of a reputation for design, and they, in some spheres, I've heard them referred to as the Apple of China. And on that note, their software is very inoffensive. I don't think it goes too cartoony. It doesn't go full Huawei. It doesn't go full Samsung in terms of just chucking features at you for the sake of it. It's happy to defer to Google where it makes sense. At least that's been my experience with the global version. I don't know what it's like in other markets. But the tweaks that it does make to things like, to help things like battery life, to help things like one-handed navigation, these things I actually appreciate over stock Android. And where stock Android does it better, I feel like they've made intelligent decisions to leave the software alone. So, battery life, 3360 milliamp hour battery. No worries whatsoever. Very power efficient chip and decent sized battery. So I've never had any issues with battery life. It usually gets through 2 days for me I'm a pretty light to medium user. Cameras, I'll touch on them briefly. I am no mobile photographer. I don't really utilize the camera all that much. What I will say is that the duo of cameras on the back are really just there to give you a little bit more depth information, but honestly, I never play around with the portrait mode. And so while the camera is much more potent than most others at this price point, obviously cameras is where a lot of manufacturers are spending time and money to make them better than each other. So yeah, camera is definitely better than a similar mid-range device like the Nokia 6.1, but it's not going to kill the flagships by any stretch. The selfie camera, on the other hand, is probably just as good as the one that is on most flagships nowadays. So here's the conclusion. You have 350 Australian dollars to spend, or let's say around 200 US dollars. You could get something like the Xiaomi Mi 8 Lite and you'd be getting a very fast performing, decent software and long battery life with a potent camera set. However, you are making trade-offs in terms of Android One not being able to have security updates like you can on the Nokia. While software updates have been coming on pretty thick and fast through Xiaomi, you don't get the, I guess, the unsullied Android version of Android One. An alternative would probably be the Nokia 7 Plus. That's probably something that's going to give you a similar design language, very similar performance in terms of the same chipset, but with Android One software. Trade-off would be it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive because right now these can be had for about 50 bucks cheaper than the 7 Plus. I know I don't do phone reviews very often and it'll probably be a little while before you see another one, but let me know what you think in the comments below. What phone are you running and why did you make the decision that you made? I really just want to raise the awareness about you don't have to spend $1,000 to get a good phone these days. I don't know if it's something about the way I think or the Australian in me or whatever, but it just seems ridiculous the amount of money we're paying on these things that we only hold on to for 2 years. That's my 2 cents. Let me know yours. Peace out.